Oh, I want to be like you. I want to walk like you, talk like you, we believe you.
Hello and welcome to the CyberBabble Podcast. This is Caleb.
And this is Zach.
And today we're going to be talking about Apple buying Intel's Qualcomm branch, RTX supercards, and the Witcher Netflix series. Let's get right into it. My name is Caleb Chaney. I'm a cybersecurity student. We both live in Oklahoma. We're studying computer kind of stuff, and that is what we like to talk about. That's the kind of thing we're going to be talking about on this podcast: computer stuff, sciencey stuff, and then just general entertainment kind of stuff that we all like to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about the Witcher Netflix series later with Henry Cavill cast as Geralt of Rivia, that kind of stuff. So, Zach, if you want to give us a little bit of introduction as to who you are.
All right. My name is Zach. I'm 22 years old, living in Oklahoma. Currently working as an aircraft mechanic, and soon to be a student of computer science at Rose State College.
Yeah, we're both enrolled at Rose State College right now, and we're fixing to go take some classes. I'm signed up for 18 credit hours this semester, and looking forward to it. And we've been talking a lot about cybersecurity kind of stuff, and that's what I'm going into. And if I had to sum it up, it's most easily understood as internet police. And so that's kind of the stigma that surrounds that, is internet cop, anti-hacker kind of stuff.
Yes, and of course the stigma surrounding somebody who's a computer science major. Obviously, it's the stereotype of the computer nerd, which, don't get me wrong,
push my glasses up before I talk to you.
Yes, absolutely. Which, don't get me wrong, that's completely true. But in a lot of ways, it's not. A lot of ways, the computer field has been opened up enough that people from all walks of life are able to get into it. And we'd like to raise a little bit more awareness about that. People tend to look at computers as this, almost like a priesthood of difficult topics that you really need a PhD to even look at, when really many times there are people working in the IT field who have never even stepped foot on college.
In the classes that I've already taken, just getting your foot in the door with IT, it only requires 9 months of schooling, and then you can get a full-time entry-level kind of job where you're going to go in and be fixing computers up. And mostly it's just for bigger businesses that do that sort of thing, like Dell and Staples and all that kind of stuff really is where you get those kind of jobs. And once you get a little more experience, that you go more into small companies hiring you to do their stuff for them. And really those companies are looking for more network kind of stuff, bring someone in that can actually rebuild their systems and network all their stuff together. And they want the guy that can fix the printer and set up your computers and stuff. And
people tend to hear the words computer science or cybersecurity, and they associate it with getting in at HP or at Google and talk about these gigantic tech firms out in California. But almost every company nowadays has an IT and cybersecurity division. Everyone has a website. If you want a job anymore, you have to go to the website. You're not going to find a paper one. So
and there's miniature structures of these people, to where there will be an IT manager, and then the people that deal with customers, and then the people that are working on physical machines, and then the people that are fixing software, and you're probably going to do a lot of each, but there's just a lot of variety and a lot of stuff that you can do. And when you get into these bigger corporations like Staples and all these kind of people, where you're going to be handing your computers over for that kind of thing, there's a lot more variety in that, a lot more people in those.
Yes, and of course that is one of the better routes. However, the way that Caleb and I are trying to enter it is actually going to be more on the side of the larger corporations, such as Apple or Google, something like that. New with Apple, actually, very recently, is we recently, as we said in our intro, have found info about them purchasing a division of Intel. They've purchased the modem building.
Yeah, they're mobile modems, the
Intel.
Qualcomm chips and stuff that the chips made by Qualcomm are Apple purchased that whole branch from Intel for 1 billion fat ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a pretty hefty big buy, and so that's kind of the new news in that right now. And what, just as far as speculation goes, what that means for Apple mobile phone, what that means for us as Apple consumers and that kind of stuff is that probably the phones are going to get more expensive. But this is like their way of putting their foot into the door of 5G phones. And they're a little bit behind as compared to Samsung, which has been talking about their S10 Plus 5G version for a while. It might even... would you look that up for me and see if the Samsung 5G phone is already out or not? Because I don't remember. I remember hearing them talking about it, and I don't remember if it came out or not. But Samsung is way ahead of the curve on that one. And one thing that I got to looking at was the specs comparison between the Galaxy S10 Plus and the iPhone XS Max. And I gotta say, as a longtime Apple mobile consumer, I'm a little bit underwhelmed by how Samsung's phones are doing in comparison. Let me pull up my specs chart here and look at this. It was the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus has a display resolution of 3040 by 1440, whereas the iPhone has the 2688 by 1242. The Samsung has a 16 megapixel ultra wide camera on the rear of the phone. It's got 12 megapixel dual pixel, and then on the iPhone it's just got one 12 megapixel wide angle. And then the front forward-facing camera on the iPhone is 7 megapixels, and the front forward-facing camera on the Samsung is 10 megapixels, and it just goes down the list all like that. One thing I was really surprised by was the fact that the iPhone only has 4 gigabytes of RAM as compared to the Samsung, which has 8 to 12. And that's kind of mind-boggling to me, just the fact that the specs don't even line up a little bit, and the Samsung Galaxy is $100 cheaper. And I'm probably still going to buy the iPhone XS Max just because I'm so used to, for another example, the battery size of the Galaxy is 4,100 milliamp hours compared to 3,174 milliamp hours for the iPhone. And I kind of think they need to step up their game a little bit. Of course, Samsung doesn't have a great history with batteries because they explode. But
yes, all of that comes with the disclaimer: you may leave with less fingers.
Yeah. So the 5G is not released yet, but it's on the way, and apparently they're way ahead of iPhone because iPhone is just now purchasing a company that can give them that technology. So they're going to be mixing the mobile modem with the processor, and what that means for us is that it could possibly be, and they're usually going to find their way around this, but it could be a little bit bigger of a phone width wise. It could be a little bit more girth to it, and it could be definitely more expensive. So things that I'm kind of expecting for the next generation of iPhones, because I'm waiting around to get my new one, just because of the fat price tag on the $1,100 XS Max. I bought one plus size phone, and I don't know that I can go back. It's kind of you get your foot in the door with it. You get a big phone, and you start liking it, and you don't want to ever go back. Because when I pick up like Ryan's phone or something, and it's hard to type on, and it's hard to see. Ryan is our friend, Zach's brother, my best friend, and we...
He is also working as an aircraft mechanic. He's working
Tinker Air Force Base.
Yes, and he is going into the same field as I am with computer science, possibly to become a software developer.
Yeah, and we're all moving in together, and the Zach and Ryan and their brother Michael have been living together for a long time. Hopefully, Ryan will be on this show eventually, and we're gonna try to do one episode a week on Fridays, and we're probably gonna put it up on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, and then also on YouTube. We'll eventually move into the video podcast side of it, and we're just going to continue doing these each and every week and talking about stuff like this. It's a little bit late at night right now, so as far as our first one goes, energy levels down a little bit. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
Drinking some Dr. Pepper right now. That's basically all we drink. My bloodstream,
is nothing but sugar and carbonated water.
Yeah, if I get a cut or something, syrup pours out. It's just Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, as far as getting back to the Apple setup, though, there has been a little bit of info. There has been a little bit of info, as stated by TheVerge.com, that the Intel company as a whole has been stagnating a little bit in recent years. So this might have been a deal instigated by Qualcomm or Intel themselves, or another possibility is that seeing as the Samsung phones, these same cheaper Samsung phones that were discussed earlier, run off of Qualcomm processors, if
And they've
Apple
got these
then
Qualcomm
owns
modems in them.
Yeah.
And they're...
Apple might be, and this is just a suspicion that I have, Apple might be trying to making a move on the competition by upping the price of these Snapdragon units that the Galaxy line uses. Because one of the bigger things, one of the larger aspects, at least from just a generic consumer's standpoint, looking at these two phones, is obviously price range. The fact that the Galaxy S10, given that the Galaxy S10 5G is going to be $999 versus the $1,000 plus price tag of the new iPhone, they might be trying to make a move to kind of even out the playing field as far as price range by owning the CPUs. And that's just a suspicion that I have. There might not be anything to it, but
yeah, there's a significant investment in the tech of these phones through Qualcomm, and the fact that Apple is buying that from Intel is kind of big news. But things will stay the same. This kind of stuff happens behind the scenes all the time, and it's not going to mean big changes overall, but these are the kind of things that build up to like the next generations, to where that's why the price tag is bigger every year, is because of things like this. And it's kind of disheartening that none of these companies ever make any sort of effort to down the cost for consumers. It kind of just generally bumps every year, and it probably will continue to go up at a significant rate for a while until we're spending the price of a car on a phone, and there'll have to be a completely different market system for that kind of stuff. There'll be people buying the used phones and stuff, and we trade in phones now that are like 3 years old for $200 and stuff like that. But
well, I mean,
that will be definitely bigger.
Cell phones, with the advent of smartphone technology, cell phones are the new laptops. You no longer have to carry around a laptop with you most of the time. You just have to have your phone. You can record, you can look up anything on the internet from your phone. You can do so much stuff from your phone now. It really is like the rise of the new phone era.
It nearly eliminates, thinking about it, if really the only plus side to that would be, having that extra operating system with you, which is not going to do so much for you. You know, if you were someone who's writing a lot of things, it could be definitely beneficial for you to have a laptop with you. But as far as mobile phones go, they replace just about anything you can think of is easier to do on a phone than it is a laptop. And I think probably you'll see less and less of laptops in general, but they're never going to go away.
No,
but
no.
These kinds of little things build up to the replacement of things in new ages and all this kind of stuff, and it's these little tiny building blocks.
Of course.
But one thing I did want to talk about was RTX cards, and so NVIDIA released their new line of RTX graphics cards just several months ago, and I bought one pretty quickly after they dropped. I started kind of getting into the market of it and really getting familiar with them, and I was pretty impressed by the performance bump that they offered at the price range that they came out, and that's one reason that I like NVIDIA for that reason, for their friendly price tags compared to what you're getting. And another thing that they've done, which can be taken as good or bad, I'm going to try to take kind of a neutral standpoint on it, but the new RTX Super cards that they've just recently announced will be replacing the regular RTX cards, and it's just all a RTX Super card is. It's a little bit bumped. It's got a little bit minorly better specs. It's a little bit bumped as far as power goes. There's less of a power limit, so they've just upped the general amount of power going into these cards, and the more power you put in, the more you get out of it, and but also the hotter it runs. So you can expect these new Super cards to probably run a little bit harder, run a little bit hotter, and be a little bit louder.
Yeah, but
in general. But
you aren't getting an AMD with
one
of these things. This is still a much more sustainable component than.
It's more of a play on the AMD sort of side of things, to where I was talking to Zach the other day about how, in general, AMD graphics cards run hotter and they put more power through them and they're less stable. NVIDIA has really always been known for reliable, stable graphics cards. In my experience, as long as I've known them, they really are, out of really the two options that you have, NVIDIA is the stable, more of a luxury kind of version, but with AMD you're getting a cheaper price tag and a little bit more performance for that price, and that's their biggest draw, especially with people that are getting 2 or 3 or 4 of these things and chaining them together and all that sort of stuff. But I've always used NVIDIA, and just in general, I typically am an NVIDIA fan, but AMD has its place and it has its uses.
In more of a layman's terms, NVIDIA would be like if you were to buy a car, it'll last you a little bit longer, versus an AMD being a motorcycle. They're fun, they're quick. They won't cost you too much initially, but there's a specific time and place to use them, and it's not going to be an all-around vehicle. Yeah. Your NVIDIA, with these new RTX cards, they make them just that much more souped up of a version of themselves. They're going to be closer to the quality of just oomph that you get from an AMD, that level of fun boost.
It's kind of like a hybrid.
But at the same quality and lifetime of an NVIDIA. And
the best part of all of it is that they're releasing at the same price point as the other ones. Just the regular base RTX series, the super cards will come out at the same price, with the exception of the RTX 2060, which is the lowest end model of the RTX series. The 2060 will be dropping at $399 as compared to $349. But that was the part that hurt me, because I bought an RTX 2060 pretty quick after they came out, and so I bought the Zotac version. I didn't go for the AMP version, which is just a manufacturer overclocked version with a light on it. So I didn't want to pay the extra $30 for that. But
for a light bulb.
Yeah, I did my own overclocking, and there's no light bulb on it. But I guess that kind of probably would have fit in a little bit better with my setup, because I went full RGB, and it's like a a light show inside my computer, and so that might have fit in a little bit better. But
your PC is a little bit somewhat ridiculous.
Yeah, it's it's RGB'd out the wazoo, and the one thing that sucks most about it is I don't have a 5-volt header plug on my motherboard, so I bought a RGB CPU cooler, and it's got this RGB ring that goes around the outside of it, and it just changes colors, and it does that like rainbow loop. And I wanted to be able to change that, but it comes with 2 plugs. One of them's for power, and the other one is for controlling the lights with software and stuff. And that was the plug that I didn't have on my motherboard, and that a lot of motherboards don't have already. Some of the newer ones do, but my motherboard is like 2016 or something. It's an MSI Z390.
Kind of in need of update.
I mean, I got one that'll last me several years, and it looks good. It's I went for a black and red theme on my PC, and it fit in really well, and it had all the stuff I needed, a little bit of expandability too and stuff. But as far as that hurt me, because I bought this card for $350, and then like a few months later they released the Supers for the same price, but they're 14 to 15%. They perform 14 to 15% better, and so that kind of sucked for me because it comes out right after, and it's like, just kidding, here's the good one.
Which,
and so
it seems to be a recurring theme with a lot of these tech companies. You'll notice is as soon as you have bought something that claims to be the fastest, they update it and make a faster one. That's cheaper.
In general a rule with tech, but they really they let me do you one better. They pulled the trick on that one. So, but as far as everyone else goes, like people just getting into them will really love that, because they're getting a better product for the same price. And so I mean that's cool. That's a thing. That's a cool thing that they did. They went back and upped it, and I'm sure they'll keep releasing new, better versions and stuff like that. But really, I look forward to when these developers and game developers and stuff get better at optimizing these RTX cards, and hopefully adding ray tracing to everything, because it's really cool, but it's so very taxing on a computer. Like my 2060, really they recommend a 2070 as the baseline for using ray tracing. And if you're going to be playing in anything over 1080p, absolutely would need like a 2080 or a 2080 Ti. And it goes 2060, 2070, 2070 Ti. I believe there's a 2070 Ti. Don't quote me on that. There might not be a 2070 Ti yet. I bet there will be eventually. There's a 2080 and the 2080 Ti, and that's as high as you can go right now. But the ray tracing takes like 30% of your performance just to turn it on, and it adds it does look better, but that's it. It doesn't look like great better, and it doesn't look like it's not. It depends on the game and how they made it, and it's really a new thing, so it's not as much as it could be yet for sure, but it enhances the lighting.
And of course, as we optimize this and get better and better into this sort of visual mapping and movement tracing technology, you're going to see a lot more traffic go into VR. You're going to see a lot more gaming start to make things specifically for the sake of VR. That's why it's so difficult right now, and why the gaming is so limited on the VR, is because it takes so much more of that ray tracking, motion tracking, physics engines out the wazoo.
The physics
and
kind of stuff. The algorithms that are going into all this new stuff they get more complex every year, and that, but we get better hardware every year, and so everything's kind of just on a loop of better.
Yeah. And of course, you can't really complain too much when you think about 20 years ago.
No.
We were still listening to the dial-up sound
as
our computer slowly loaded one picture.
Yeah. There's a really interesting video I watched of NVIDIA's old. It shows like the 20-year history of like NVIDIA graphics cards or whatever. It might not have been quite 20 years, but it shows, you know, like way early on, like back in the early 2000s, from the point of, no, I think it went back to like the 90s, from graphics cards in the 90s all the way up till today, and then how much they've advanced, and you know, even our phones have like significantly better graphics than they had back then and everything, and how people got better at animations too. It was a really cool video to watch. And then also like a video game series that's been going for 10 or more years, to watch how the graphics advance from the first one to the last one is a really interesting thing. I watched the Tomb Raider games because there's so many of those, you know, back in the first one when it looked worse than Minecraft. And that is not an insult at Minecraft. I had my time in that game. But back to when it was just blocks, and then till Shadow of the Tomb Raider today. And
I think that's one of the things that we've become slightly spoiled in that sense.
Yeah.
We got when you think back to the beginning of like gaming in particular, and console gaming, you look at the introduction of the first PlayStation in America, and it was the first time we had 3D mapping on our games. And the first PlayStation system, it wasn't made to run anything except video games. It had 128 kilobytes of memory.
Yeah.
And that's it. And by today's standard, that is complete garbage. And and then we got used to these huge leaps because of a standard set, I think in part by Sony and by PlayStation, because PlayStation 2 from PlayStation 1, that memory and the graphics and everything jumped by like a huge margin. The memory in particular, it went from 128 kilobytes to 4 megabytes.
Is that factual?
Yes.
Dang.
I was researching on this a little bit ago.
That's still like nothing, but
it's not much by today's standard, but when you think about
back then it was a massive bump. Like for kilobytes to megabytes, that's a big bump.
Yeah, you could have,
Yoshi.
To put it in layman's terms, you could have fit the memory of 9 PlayStation 1s into one PlayStation 2.
Easily.
As far as memory. Yeah. It was huge. It was a massive jump. And I think that's the thing that we've...
One small step.
Because I think we've begun to expect that, though. Is like we've gotten to the point where we aren't wowed by these small changes, but now everybody's paying attention. When gaming and computer systems and everything first came out, it was a field no one paid attention to. You were more concerned with like your mail.
Amazon, the super companies like the big 5, they're even, you know, Amazon wants to get in their foot in the door on developing games as well. That could be massive, because I can see Amazon, if it isn't already, becoming like the number one, like the biggest company. You know, like their growth rate is just...
Amazon is on track to be the first $1 trillion plus company in the coming decades.
Yeah.
It's massive. And if they add that to their
Look up Jeff Bezos' net worth. I saw something, I don't remember his net worth, but I heard, I was listening to the Rooster Teeth podcast, and they broke down, this was years ago though, they broke down how much money he makes in a second, and it was like more than most people's annual
salary.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
It's like $60,000 a second or something like that.
So much. He makes so much money that he can't spend it.
His net worth is $113.67 billion US.
Yeah.
Which puts
Bill Gates is at 103 and Jeff Bezos is at $113 billion.
And both of them are ahead of Warren Buffett, the stock market king, who is sitting at a cool $80 billion. The envy he must be feeling.
And then Mackenzie Bezos at $38 billion.
Yeah. Both Jeff and Mackenzie Bezos are in the top 5 wealthiest people on the planet right now.
The Bezos family rolling.
Yes.
Can you imagine the kind of security that guy has around him just at all times? And everything in his life must be so secure.
He probably doesn't even need it. to be honest. Most of his stuff is either automated or would continue to run without his presence.
If he got robbed, he would still have like... if he got robbed at his house and lost like $1 billion or whatever he had at his house at that time or whatever...
He would
it
say,
even
do it
affect
90 more times,
Do
and
it
I will still be a
112
billionaire.
more times and I'll still be a billionaire. That is ridiculous.
That's insane wealth. But
Look up Jeff Bezos' net worth 2018. And let's see how much it goes up in a year and break that down. He was worth... No. Wait.
oh,
Just hit 129 billion. So he actually dropped, like,
I
significantly.
know what it was.
What's
Okay,
that?
this was because of his divorce.
Oh,
The reason that
okay.
Mackenzie Bezos
They had like a
is
collective.
a $38 billion worth is because she took it from him.
Took the money from him.
He had been close to $130
Yeah.
billion
Wow.
a year ago, and because of the divorce,
That's
his
pretty cool.
ex-wife is now an individual billionaire.
Yeah.
And he
Oh,
is
yeah.
still,
Big time.
and he is still the wealthiest man on planet
Even
Earth.
after that massive split, she takes $30 billion with her, and
It's actually
he's,
closer to 40 because it was $38 billion.
and and he's still the number one richest man in the
Yeah,
world.
he-
How much does that say about him?
Yeah, that just shows a lot of foresight and a lot of intelligence as far as business savvy. I gotta say, because I mean,
I just watched Limitless today, and there's so much like business and all that kind of stuff in that movie, and Jeff Bezos might be on those pills.
yeah, he might be on
NZT.
the NZT pill. Yeah, he certainly seems like it. He and Elon Musk both are at that genius range where it's
Anything's
difficult
at their
to
disposal.
it's really difficult to even think about the way that they go about business at that point. I mean, this is a guy like talking about Elon Musk.
Jeff Bezos is business.
Yeah.
If you look up business in the dictionary, it's Jeff Bezos.
Bezos' face. That's it. Well, and I mean, but we've seen companies that were huge.
Oh, you know what? He
tank.
also saves a lot of money on a barber.
Oh.
Because he's bald as crap.
Bald. So bald. I mean, he's still got eyebrows.
That's why he's
so
a billionaire. He doesn't have a...
He
pays
doesn't
no
go to the barber.
His eyebrows make up for the rest of it. Chunk boys.
No, secretly he has a carpet on his chest. But,
It makes up for his whole head. It's just a bear
yeah,
rug.
his hair just migrated. It didn't go
That's
away.
why his
It
wife
migrated.
left.
She's like, I can't take it anymore. But, and I mean, we've seen this happen. There's a lot of companies that are going into the cyberspace, and it's exactly because of success stories like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. And we've seen companies that missed the train and completely fell off the map. I was actually reading a while back about our old friend Blockbuster Industries, that movie
One
rental
time it was
place.
an empire.
It
now
was
there's one left.
massive. There's only one anymore. And
It's in Alaska,
I
right?
found out.
Or not Alaska. Where is...
I think it's in like Maine.
I'm gonna Google real quick, see where but continue.
Okay. Well, they actually had an offer early on from the earliest developers of Netflix.
Dang.
The people who now own one of the other companies on track to be $1 trillion industry in the next couple decades offered to partner
it's in
up.
Oregon. The last Blockbuster is in Oregon.
Well, I mean, but they had the opportunity to jump on with Netflix pretty early on, and we've seen how that went. They said that they didn't think it would take off. They thought it was the internet thing was a fad, and time has proven that it was anything but a fad.
Yeah.
And now Netflix is kind of making DVDs and especially movie rental places, into a thing of the past. You've got like a couple of places left, but they're all dying. And it's because of the advent of these online streaming services and TV shows. Like, you could either pay $40 and buy a season of Game of Thrones, or you could pay a monthly subscription fee to Netflix and for $12 and watch any show you want, including Game of Thrones, for the rest of forever.
I wish Game of Thrones was on Netflix. It's not. I think it's HBO exclusive through the contract or whatever.
Yeah.
For whenever that lease is, like, we could get, unless it's like a permanent thing. I don't actually know the I don't know the terms of their contract, but it's HBO exclusive for at least for now. But in the future we could get actually the whole series on there. But I actually saw a statistic of how much Netflix pays for these shows, and I want to say they paid over $100 million to put Infinity War on Netflix. I'm
sure.
So much.
I am sure that they have made their money back, because that movie came very close to breaking the world record for most revenue made in a single week by a movie release.
Endgame came even closer, I think. Or
they re-released Endgame so that they could specifically beat the last record, because it was Avatar's
still number one.
It's still number one, and they tried to beat it.
Reigning King Supreme.
Yeah. Like Endgame, it was like, I think 2 million shy.
Yeah. Even with inflation, Endgame couldn't beat Avatar.
Yeah. Specifically with inflation. It's been a couple of years since Avatar.
Yeah.
So
it's been 10 years, right? 10 years since Avatar. I want to say 2009.
Gosh.
But
please don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that.
But
man.
Avatar blew
I'm too young to feel old. But yeah, that we're seeing stuff like that. People are putting more effort into the CGI aspects of everything, and getting
Avatar
into that.
was ahead of its time graphically, way ahead of its time. But one thing, like Netflix, they're ballers. They're kind of gangster because they risk a lot just by the fact that they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to put these shows on there. And like, they make their money right by people buying subscriptions, and the only thing that entices people to buy the subscriptions is the good shows on there. So they spend just hundreds of millions of dollars to get the shows on there, hoping that these people will continue to. But
that's the political game,
danger to
man.
Netflix, but I don't remember.
That's the political game, man.
Yeah.
You promise a whole bunch of
investors.
investors.
They risk it for the biscuit. That's what they do.
You promise a whole bunch of investors. You're like, hey, we got this TV show. We got Friends to sign on. You're gonna give us a couple $1 million. Yeah. And
Wasn't
then
Friends
once,
one of the highest
and they
grossing?
haven't. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, dude.
So
10 seasons. It reigned supreme for more than a decade.
Yeah.
People are still watching it, but it's the political side of it in business is like, you go to one person, a backer, and you say, I have this guy on my side, even if you specifically haven't spoken to that person, and get the money to pay that person, then go and talk to them and say, hey, will you come on for this much money? We got a whole bunch of investors interested. And so really it's glorified lying is what I'm trying to say. Business is lying. but
getting paid to lie.
Yes, it is getting paid to lie. But if you do it successfully enough, it becomes not a lie. And then everyone is happy. So
profitable lying.
Yes, extremely profitable lying.
One thing I wanted to talk about while we were on the topic of Netflix was the Witcher series that is coming to Netflix, and that was something that got announced last year. And I know, did you play any of the Witcher games?
I played into The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
I didn't get very far, but that was mainly because it was rental.
Yeah.
But from what I had played, I was very quickly becoming addicted.
It's a fantastic game. I gotta say, like, if I was gonna recommend, if you ever get in the mood to play a game that, you know, kind of like Skyrim, to where you can get involved with the world and you know, if you're in that kind of mood for something that has a fantastic story, like the gameplay is great and the graphics are fantastic, but the story is really, really intriguing, and that was kind of something I wanted to look into more. But.
Yeah, and if the memification of Fortnite has told us anything, it's that the gaming community actually does care a little bit more about story than it had let on.
Cares about a quality game rather than.
Yeah, you can't just focus 100% on the gameplay and just say it's a battle royale and it work anymore.
And then a Witcher 3 comes out and it's got 100% in every category, and you're like, okay, well, here's the award, take it.
Here's all of the awards, take them. I hope you have room for these at your house.
I think it was probably Witcher 3 that brought what's the studio? CD Projekt Red. That's the people that make it. Took me a second to remember their name. CD Projekt Red. I think back in 2015 was when Witcher 3 came out, and the success of that game, like, just like
catapulted.
It catapulted their business off. And you know, they were a business for a while, and they had a couple games, but the success of Witcher 3 just shot them up in the air. As at this point, they probably, I guess you would, I'm pretty sure that you'd consider that AAA, probably. AAA game company, maybe. I'm not sure kind of where those standards lie, but
if it isn't, then it's on a fast track too.
Oh,
if it's got titles, if it's got any other titles other than The Witcher that are at that quality, because we've been waiting for high quality games.
Cyberpunk 2077. They've been talking about it
You're
for years.
Breathtaking.
No, you're breathtaking. And that has got a whole lot of hype surrounding it right now, and they've been making it for years.
And once you wade through all the Keanu Reeves memes and everything, and look at the actual story, you realize that there really is substance to it. It's really a title to look out for.
But mainly Keanu Reeves.
Yes, but mainly John Wick.
Yeah, I was kind of excited about that game. Like I've heard people, you know, if you get into a conversation with someone you're not super familiar with, or just someone you don't even know, and the topic of games comes up, it seems like inevitably the topic of Cyberpunk comes up somehow, and that's kind of like a hint to me that it probably is going to be a good game, because everyone knows about it, and everyone basically everyone in the world already has it.
Yeah.
Just because of how many people are already into it.
Well, I mean, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not as big of a gamer as most people. I tend to focus more on like stories and shows, and then just practical aspects and things. And that to me tells me that since even I have heard a lot about this Cyberpunk,
it's a big deal. Yeah,
means that it's reaching a lot farther than the rest of the titles that are going on right now.
At a minimum, its marketing is very, very good. So even if it turns out to not be a great game, it was very well marketed. But I think it has a lot of potential, and so probably look into that for sure, just because of the fact that I thought Witcher 3 was really, really good. I sunk a lot of hours into Witcher 3, and it's definitely one of those games that I go back to, like at any given time, kind of like Skyrim. I'll go back to it, and you basically never... the thing with Skyrim is, eventually you put like a couple hundred hours into it, and you've kind of experienced all of it, and at that point you just do whatever's most fun, or role play a character or something like that. But with Witcher 3, you pretty much never run out of stuff to do. There's so much substance, and there's so much lore and story that you could get into if you really wanted to, and that is pretty intriguing to me. The card game, I don't remember what the card game was called.
There's a card game?
Yeah, there's a game inside the game.
Oh my god!
And also, Gwent is what it's called.
Gwent.
It's a card game inside the game, and it's got its own like quest lines and everything. You can play Gwent with the NPCs and stuff, and collect the cards. It's a whole full on like Yu-Gi-Oh inside.
Oh my gosh.
It's not Yu-Gi-Oh. I wouldn't compare it to that, but it's funny. It's cool, and I think there's a standalone Gwent game now. Came out a while ago. That's old news, but still.
Yeah, that hearing all that, and from my own experience playing the game, that mainly what that makes me think of when I hear about the fact that they're making it into a show for Netflix is just hoping that they actually respect the source material.
Yeah, well, here's the big deal with this. One thing that really worries me is I don't have a lack of faith in the books and in the Netflix series, but I am in love with Witcher because of the game / games. But Netflix came out and said that they based it. The first season is based off of the first book, not off of the game. And so that was the one thing, like, that's probably the only thing about the show that worries me, is that it's not based on the game. But the game is based off the books, but it's a little more loose.
Well, they probably structured it that way specifically to ward off issues, is because whenever you talk about basing it on a game, there's, how many times have you heard about a movie being based on a game?
There's a lot more success from book-based
so terrible. Like, have you ever seen, or do you remember the Super Mario Brothers movie?
Oh my gosh, the live action one?
The live action Super Mario Bros. Movie. It was the most terrible movie.
Oh man,
I think I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah, that's way old.
And the game that it's based on is so beloved.
Also,
it tanked. I'm actually somewhat amazed that John Leguizamo was able to keep his career going after that. It really was terrible, and I think that's kind of what they're trying to avoid by basing it on the books.
Yeah, when I first saw the clips of that movie, I did not watch the movie, and I will not watch that movie unless I just need a good laugh. But the clips that I saw from that, man, it's been a while. That completely lost my mind. But the clips I saw of that, I didn't, when I first saw it, I did not think it was an actual movie. I thought it was like a Smosh, like a Smosh skit or something.
Oh yeah, like honestly, if it weren't for the fact that the characters were named what they are, you wouldn't know that it is based on Mario. Like the Koopas, the turtles that are in it. In this movie, they're like big thuggish looking businessmen with tiny lizard heads. That's what a Koopa is. And like Bowser is just this bald lizard man who's like the mayor of this underworld town. And
turns out he's like Kingpin.
He's like way more focused on like winning the election than he is on like keeping Princess Peach or anything. Like they took almost nothing from the games. And I think,
do you remember the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action movie? Not the 2015 one or whatever it was, but the old ones where it's just the dudes in the horrible suits.
Yeah, I wasn't super big on the new live action ones.
Yeah,
just
the CGI
because
one.
Just because I did grow up watching the old school ones.
Yeah, like I don't look
from
back
the 90s.
on those with bad memories.
They respected the source material enough that you were perfectly fine with anything they did with it. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there's a very loose setup as to what you need to cover with them anyway. I mean, all it is 4 turtles and a rat got doused in some nuclear chemical soup and then became ninjas and decided they were going to find.
Can you imagine describing that plot
Foot Clan
to someone like someone pitching that idea? They're like, so 4 baby turtles and a rat climb into some nuclear soup and they become ninjas, big ninjas, and they save the world. The guy's like, you know what?
Let's times. Do it. And they live in New York.
One of them likes pizza, and the other one likes nunchucks. And then there's 2 more.
All of them love pizza, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just what Netflix might be trying to avoid, though, is is the Super Mario
I see
Bros. Thing. It's a lot easier.
Basing something off of something that's
off of a
based on
book.
something is too far out sometimes.
Yeah.
Like Avatar, for example, the live action M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, you mean okay? You mean the movie that made everybody blacklist M. Night Shyamalan for the next like 30 years?
Blacklist him until what was that?
He's
The
still
Visit
on the
came out.
blacklist. He's still
People like
blacklisted.
that movie though. The Visit.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge M. Night fan. I mean, he's got his moments. But,
Yeah. He
Dragon
has
Ball Z movie. What was it?
Oh my
what was
gosh.
it called?
Dragon Ball Evolution.
Evolution. Yeah.
That is the only thing I can think of that can contend against the Super Mario Bros. Movie as far as disrespecting the source material. That it was an abomination. It was on all accounts the worst adaptation of a story I've ever seen. And of course, whenever you talk to people who are fans of that show, of Dragon Ball Z or Super or just Dragon Ball, they all know about that movie, and they will all spit on it until the day that they die.
There's not a one person or one group of people who like that movie, you know?
I've never met anybody who actually liked it. It was either they hadn't seen it, or they hated it.
and even when you're a kid watching it, like I was younger when I watched it, and even then it wasn't like a movie that I enjoyed. Like that movie didn't do anything right. It didn't. What a waste of money. What a waste of my time.
Yes. Getting back to the Netflix series and specials, though, another series that some of you might like to check out, outside of The Witcher, which I only learned about that from Caleb here recently, so I'm definitely going to check that one out, is a series called Halt and Catch Fire. It's a series that talks about, it's essentially the history of the company Compaq from back in the early 1980s up through the 90s in early computer development. Essentially, it begins with a company, Cardiff Electric, that had done some computer stuff. It definitely did computer aspects, but it was mostly industrial because it was the heyday of IBM. Anything and everything was done with IBM components, and they had such a stranglehold on everything. Nobody thought that they could even compete with it. And then Compaq came out, or in this case in the show, Halt and Catch Fire, Cardiff Electric, came out and reverse engineered the IBM processing unit and software in a way so that they could subvert the patent laws. So they made the first copycat computers for a fraction of the cost.
That's really interesting.
It details all of the legal battles in a way that doesn't focus on like just lengthy litigation, and at the same time talks about the leaps and bounds that happened in technology at the time. Talks about the eccentricities of software developers back in a time when nobody really knew too much about computers.
They were the pioneers.
Like the original, like old west cowboys of the cyber world. They really
They're the
did.
one we'll read about, like our grandkids will read about in a history book.
Yes. It's starring Mackenzie Davis and a few others. Mackenzie Davis is she's going to be in the new Terminator movie. She plays the new Terminator. And
what was it called? Terminator.
Something like Dark Arises or something like that.
It was something like that. But really, the biggest thing I took away from that trailer was old Arnold Schwarzenegger at the door. Yeah, I did honestly. At this point, how is he still in these? But it was like an old, grayed out Arnold Schwarzenegger, and
I'm looking forward to how they justify a robot aging.
yeah.
Like very specifically, mention
Yeah,
all
they
the
didn't
time.
try to cover it or anything. He was just old
He's
Arnold.
just old. Yeah.
Let's see, Mackenzie Davis, Lisa Sheridan, Carrie Bichet, Lee Pace. I don't know.
Lee Pace, some
Several
of you
of these
might
people.
know as Thranduil from the Hobbit trilogy, the Elf King, and
Okay.
Legolas's dad.
Yeah.
He is in the show *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Wow, he hasn't aged.
Like at all.
Yeah.
No. There's actually 4 seasons of this
He's
show
on
now.
NCT or something. All of
Yes,
them.
all of them. So we've got Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk,
They're all
Lee
on
Pace,
NCT. How do I get some?
Sandra Bullock, Will Smith for sure.
Oh, yeah.
He hasn't aged since his Fresh
But then
Prince
there's Arnold
days.
Schwarzenegger.
And Keanu Reeves makes the NCT. Because we all know
It's
he
his
is
tears.
secretly a vampire.
It's his dried up tears. They turn him to NCT.
Yes, Keanu Reeves is an immortal vampire with pictures dating back to the 1600s.
This
and
guy-
his dried tears.
Scoot McNairy playing Gordon Clark in the new and *Halt and Catch Fire*. I like his mustache. That's all I'm gonna say. It makes me want to watch the show.
He has a very nice mustache, and that comes about specifically in the 4th season. You'll have to see how his facial hair
I'm
grows
gonna skip to that.
through the show.
I'm gonna read the last page of the book and just mustache.
Yes, and you will be completely lost.
Easy along after a good mustache.
Yes, absolutely. And it does talk about like the somewhat back alley nature of the tech industry, which I would say still kind of exists even today. But
I mean, every
especially back then when it was such a new virgin territory, nobody knew how to address it. The idea of identity theft or like catfishing people, nobody had a term for it even. So it delves into those aspects of living in a cybernetic world, living in a technologically advanced society, and it details how you got your laptop as well.
Yeah.
So, and how we
How we
eventually
got
got
from point A to point B.
smartphones.
Yeah, and now how our point B turns into point C through Z. The Witcher 3 series on Netflix. Have you seen the trailer?
I have not, actually. No.
We're going to watch that right after this podcast ends here shortly in a few minutes, but there was a few more things I wanted to talk about on it. It's supposed to premiere in autumn of this year, 2019. But I've got high hopes for it, and that kind of is dangerous, that, hinging things on the high hopes for especially for like a Netflix series, but for the few people that had the high hopes for this Stranger Things in quotation marks, definitely got it right. So I hope they continue down that trail of Netflix making some really good stuff.
Let's
And,
hope we have another great series to look forward to, as opposed to another Dragon Ball Evolution.
Yeah, I really hope not. But it was Radio Times. I read an article talking about Witcher 3 Netflix series, and they've got their hopes set at the next Game of Thrones, and that's shooting high, and that's pretty cool. And I kind of hope that it goes that way. That's shooting pretty high, but that would be really cool, especially for the gaming community, because I know every single one of us is going to be on that. But I hope that it can be like a really big show, because I'm excited about it. And Henry Cavill, it's Cavill, right? Henry Cavill.
Yes.
He was in Man from U.N.C.L.E., which love that movie. That's going to be my recommendation for this episode.
Or some of you
watch
might
that
know
movie.
him. Maybe not all of you
Superman.
might know him as Superman.
Yeah, that was where
he starred in
got
a
big bump.
little-known series, a little-known movie called Justice League, and Man of Steel. He is the new Superman. I'm kind of intrigued to see how
Knew a
he's
couple of
going
years
to
ago.
Yeah.
Relatively new.
Relatively new. I'm kind of intrigued to see how he's going to juggle these dual roles, because DC has been ramping up their production in recent years as well.
Trying to catch up with Marvel. They're like,
Yeah.
we're out of the Infinity Saga now. We got to catch them on the new slope.
Yes.
Which is another interesting thing we'll have to talk about next time. The next generation of Marvel movies past the Infinity Saga. What was officially... Did they say what was officially the last movie of the Infinity Saga? Because I don't think Endgame classified as the last movie in the Infinity Saga. Or maybe it did.
I believe it was Endgame. If it wasn't Endgame, then it was definitely Infinity War.
No.
What's the end of the Infinity Saga? Infinity War.
It went backwards. How did this happen?
Well, I mean, but this has been a saga that's been spanning, like,
or at least the
10 years?
phase. And maybe I'm thinking about the phase. Or maybe I'm
it's like,
confused,
isn't Infinity War like phase 3?
No, it's like phase... Well... Endgame ended like phase 5, maybe 4 or 5, but we're around 4, 5, or 6, somewhere around there. But it might have been that was the end of one of the phases. But I think Far From Home is not, like, I don't think we've got our first movie in the next phase yet. But they came out and talked about all the movies and new characters that they're going to be bringing in, like, the new series and new phases, and it's a lot of... There's a bit more of the ones that are kind of out there, and then also...
They're bringing in many more obscure faces because
one's lesser known than Avengers.
They've already established the fact that people are interested in Marvel.
Yeah, they've got them on the hook now.
They didn't start with that benefit.
No.
So now that they have us on the hook, they can sell us anything. So
everyone goes to see any movie that Marvel's going to put out. So no matter what it is, we're probably going to see it. Hopefully, they'll make a Fantastic Four movie that's actually good.
Maybe they don't have a winning track record on that.
Yeah.
I just hope they get Jim from The Office to be Mr. Fantastic.
That would be
awesome. Be a great first step in that series. Of course, the current director for the Marvel franchise, Kevin Feige, has been saying that he's aiming to make the focus be on Captain Marvel as the new Thor for the strongest character in the Marvel universe. So we may be in that realm.
They already confirmed Captain Marvel 2, I think. But
That,
hopefully they don't put too much emphasis on her, because I don't think many people, including myself, are a big fan of her, even though she's a little bit...
There are a lot of people who are a fan of the character. They're just not a big fan of the actress.
Yeah.
However, all of that will have to wait for our next podcast coming up next week.
Yeah, next Friday.
On Friday between 11 and 12.
Yeah.
This has been CyberBabble with Zach
and Caleb, and we are signing off. See you next time.